Hello guys, good morning everybody and welcome to our lesson. This lesson will be the first dealing with a new period in the history of Britain and of British culture and literature. That's to say the Romantic Age. Romantic. My first question, I've got a question for you is, what do you think is romantic? Okay, when you hear this word romantic, what do you usually think about? For me, for example, romantic might be, I don't know, for example, a dinner, okay, with the person I love at the candlelight, or a beautiful walk at the sunset on the beach, or something like that. What is romantic in your opinion? I am so curious to know something about it, so please send me a message, a very short voice message, as soon as you watch this video, saying who you are, what class you are in, and giving me a definition of what, in your opinion, is romantic. Then we will work on it because we will see that most of your answers will be very different from what romantic means in literature, in culture. Okay, in order to tell you something more about the Romantic Age, I will split this lesson into two parts. In the very first part of this lesson, I will deal with the historical social background of the period. So we will analyze together which were the most important events which characterized this period. Okay, that is called the Romantic Age, l'età romantica. Then, in our following lesson, we will focus on some social revolutions which characterized this period, and then in some other lessons we will start to focus on the literary production, British literary production during the Romantic Age. In order to help you to follow me, I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation, and you will find, as usual, this PowerPoint presentation in a new folder in Didactica that will be called the Romantic Age. Okay, let's start. I share with you my desktop. Okay, here it is. I hope you can see it. And now I go to the presentation that I have put here. Okay, let's start from the very beginning. Here you can see that the Romantic Age, or the age that we call Romantic, covers a very big span of time. It starts in Britain in 1760 and it ends in 1837. Why do we say that this age ends in 1837? Because in 1837 a new age started for Britain, the age that is called the Victorian Age, okay, and that is usually considered an age that is very different from the Romantic one, which takes its name from the Queen who reigned during that period, that was Queen Victoria. Sorry guys, I would like not to share with you only my desktop, but to share, okay, with you also part of my face, so you will be able to see the presentation and to see also me when I speak. Okay, so let's start again from the beginning. As I told you, we will focus today on the first part of the historical and social background, so on the most important events which characterized this age. First of all, when I say Romantic Age, I mean a period, an age full of war and revolution. So somebody might think that it was not romantic at all. When I think of romantic age, I think of a period, most of all for Britain, but for most of Europe, which was characterized by warfare and by revolution. It is also called the Age of Revolutions because it was, as I said, characterized by more than one revolution. What is a revolution? Try to think about it. I can say, for example, that a revolution is a change. It is obviously a change, but it is not a gradual change. A revolution is a fast, quick, rapid, and dramatic change. So it is, for example, an event or a series of events which changes dramatically and very rapidly the appearance, okay, or the things. Which were the most important revolutions which characterized this period, which changed Britain and the world so much? The very first is the American War of Independence, okay, or the American Revolution. We can call it the American War of Independence or the American Revolution, which was fought between 1775 and 1883. 1883 is the year when Britain recognized the independence of its 13 American colonies. Okay. Then the second important revolution which took place, which characterized the Romantic Age, was the French one, which started in 1789, okay, you should know, on the 14th of July, and which ended in 1794 with the end of the Reign of Terror and with the beginning of the reign of Napoleon Bonaparte. Then we have another important war. We said that this is the age of revolutions and of wars. Maybe the most important wars which Britain fought during this period were the Napoleonic Wars, which England, with other European countries, fought against the Napoleonic France. Then we have two very important social, okay, and economical revolutions, which were most of all British, which were the industrial one and the social reforms. But during this lesson, we will focus on the American War of Independence or on the American Revolution, on the French Revolution, on the Napoleonic Wars, and then in another lesson we will focus more specifically on the Industrial Revolution and on the social reforms which characterized Britain during this age. Let's start with this period, with the Romantic Age. This period we said that was the age of revolutions, but don't forget that most of the social political revolutions which we will focus on were built or were born out of new ideas and ideals. Ideas and ideals. Nacquero quindi da nuove idee e nuovi ideali. When you think of the ideals which characterized the Romantic Age and which characterized the political revolutions of the period, you can think of the three ideals that you know in French, okay, liberté, fraternité, égalité, okay, or in English, liberty, freedom, okay, fraternity or brotherhood, okay, and equality. These were the most important new ideals which spread, okay, starting from from America, the new continent, and then spread firstly in France and then in the whole Europe, okay, from the last part of the 18th century to the 19th century. This age was characterized by feelings. Okay, here there is a missing E, sorry. Okay, by feelings of revolt against the old traditions and the old attitudes. So this period, okay, the Romantic Age was the age of revolutions, but the first revolutions were in the ideas, in the ideals, and they started with this spread general feeling of revolt against everything that was old, everything which was considered outworn, consunto, consumato, logoro, the traditions and the attitudes of the past were considered outworn, and the romantics, the romantic thinkers, the romantic philosophers, the romantic artists, also the politicians had this strong feeling of revolt against the old, everything that was considered old and outworn. Another strong feeling which spread during the Romantic Age was a need for social justice. Social justice. So, for the equality, we said that an ideal was equality, brotherhood, and so this need for a social justice. And then, last but not least, this period, or the revolutions which characterized this period, were based on an eagerness for change. Eagerness. What do I mean when I say eagerness? Eagerness means need to change, voglia, ok? Desiderio di cambiamento, bisogno di cambiamento. So these were the most important features which characterized the Romantic Age. Sorry. Let's start with the first revolution in time. Okay, if we take the timeline of the Romantic Age, we will see that the Romantic Age opens, okay, with the American War of Independence, or, as I have already told you, with the American Revolution. Okay, let's see what are the steps which led the English colonies in America to declare their independence, and then after some years in 1883 to see their independence recognized by the English British government, by the British king, okay, namely George III. I hope that you remember, because we have already said much about them, the dynasty of the Hanover. Okay, the Hanover, in the dynasty of Hanover, we have a lot of Georges. Okay, and if you remember, we have already said that in 1760 George II, the second of Hanover, died, and he was succeeded by George III. George III, when he became King of England, was only 22 years old, but he was the very first of the Hanover to be born in England and to speak English as his mother tongue, as his first language. Don't forget that George II, for example, and also George I couldn't speak English at all. They were not born in England. They didn't know the English problems, okay? While George III was born in England, he spoke English as his first language, and so even though he was 20 years old, he was, or he tried to be a good king. Why have I just said he tried? Because he actually was a kind of loser. He was the king who lost the British colonies in America. Okay, so he lost much. Let's see which steps led Britain to lose its colonies in America. When George III became king, he wanted to strengthen the power of the crown. What does it mean to strengthen? To make bigger, to make the power of the crown of the king stronger, okay? And he also created a kind of party that was called the King's Friends, gli amici del re, because he wanted to be surrounded by faithful people, by faithful politicians who could support him also in the parliament. And he succeeded in strengthening the power of the crown, and he succeeded in using, okay, one of his men, Lord North, and in making him become the prime minister. So the reign of George III, supported by the prime minister Lord North, was a reign in which a policy of heavy taxation of the American colonies began. So England had 13 colonies in the new continent, and one of the first things which King George III did together with Lord North and his prime minister was to impose new heavy taxes on the American colonies. Okay. These taxes were very heavy, okay, and they were on the most used products of the American colonies. So these new taxes created a lot of discontent. The new taxes and the new duties means dazi doganali, okay? The new taxes and the new duties imposed by George III and the British government on the colonies created a lot of discontent, and a slogan was born in this period in the American colonies. And this slogan spread and became the slogan of the independence, okay, of the revolution. The slogan was the one that you can see here, that you can read here on this slide, and it was no taxation without representation. Let's listen to me carefully. What do I mean when I say no taxation without representation? Okay, what do I mean? Not It meant that the colonies, okay, the people living in the British colonies in America, in the new continent, had to pay a lot of taxes, a lot of new duties, but since they were colonies, they could not have any representatives in the Parliament in London, in Westminster. So they only had to pay taxes, they only had to pay very heavy duties on the import and export of products, but they couldn't make any decision. They had absolutely no political power. So they couldn't accept this situation, obviously, and they had this slogan. They said, no taxation without representation. It means we don't want any taxation, we don't want to pay any taxes, any more duties, unless we have a representation. So unless we are allowed to choose to elect our representatives, so our politicians, in the Parliament of Westminster. They didn't want to be only a place where Britain could, or where from Britain could take money. They wanted to be able to decide. They wanted to be able to send some of their representatives to the Parliament in Westminster to make decisions, to be important. Okay, they didn't only want to give money, but they said we can give money if you, king, if you parliament, British Parliament, allow us to send you our representatives to London, to Westminster, in order to make decisions, okay, political decisions, I mean. Let's go back to my face and desktop. Here we are. So guys, this slogan, okay, so no taxation without representation, became the slogan of the rebels, of the people who wanted to fight for their rights, okay, the colonists who wanted to fight for their rights. And the protests, okay, the riots started during this period. Because of this spread discontent, a lot of rebels started riots. Riots means rebellion, sommosse, okay? And there were two events, the first in 1770 and the second in 1773, which are considered the first steps towards the beginning of the American Revolution, and so towards the American independence. Let's focus briefly on the first of these two events, which happened on the 5th of March 1770, and this event is known as the Boston Massacre. Ok, the Boston Massacre, il massacro di Boston. The word massacre makes you understand that a lot of people died. And who were these people? They were colonists, okay, in Boston, who were protesting because of the new taxes and the new duties which had been imposed by the British government. What happened? The British soldiers who were there fired into the crowd during this riot, and a lot of people were killed. It was really a terrible moment, a dramatic moment in the life of the colonists, but also in the life of the British soldiers who had to fire or who fired into the crowd. Okay, so the Boston Massacre makes us think that the situation was really difficult, okay, that there was a lot of tension between the people living in the British colonies and Britain. In fact, the second event which made the American Revolution start, happened on the 16th of December 1773 in Boston again, okay, and it is known with the name Boston Tea Party. When we speak of party here, we don't mean a real festa, okay? But here again there was a protest. This tea party was a kind of riot, a kind of protest. A huge group of rebels who were called the Sons of Liberty, okay, led by their leader Samuel Adams, okay, decided to protest against the Tea Act. What was this Tea Act? The Tea Act was a law imposed by Britain, which Britain imposed on its colonies, and this act said that the tea imported by the colonies had to be shipped and traded only by the English tea company, British tea company. Okay. The colonies couldn't accept such an act because it limited their freedom to trade. Okay, and for this reason, the Sons of Liberty, as I have already said, led by this strong man, Samuel Adams, decided to make this kind of protest. What did they do? They boarded on a British ship whose name was Dartmouth. This ship was docked. Docked means ormeggiata in the harbor of Boston. They wore Indian customs and they threw the entire load of tea into the water in a form of protest. Okay, that's exactly what they did. This protest was a shocking one, okay, and the British government, who were afraid of the protests that were starting in America, decided to impose the coercive or intolerable acts. These acts are four, then after some years we have also a fifth one, okay, and these acts are called coercive or intolerable, coercitivi o intollerabili. What are they? They are four acts that are based on punitive measures, okay, in retaliation. Retaliation means as a sort of punishment for acts of defiance. So, the British government with these four acts wanted to punish the inhabitants of the British colonies because of the riots, because of the protests that had happened. Let's focus on these intolerable acts of 1774. Please pay attention and take notes because you will not find, okay, much about these intolerable acts on your textbook. You will only find some words and I would like to know something more about them. So please listen to me and if you can, take notes. So the first of these coercive or intolerable acts of 1774 was the Boston Port Bill, l'atto del Porto di Boston. Okay, what did the British do? With this bill, the British closed the port, the harbor of Boston, until, okay, a kind of restitution was made for the destroyed tea during the Boston Tea Party. So this bill, the Boston Port Bill, succeeded or came soon after the Boston Tea Party. It was a kind of a punitive measure. Okay, so the harbor was closed until the city made a restitution for all the destroyed tea during the Boston Tea Party. Then we have another intolerable act, okay, which immediately followed the first one. That was the Massachusetts Government Act. Massachusetts was a colony, okay, the colony in which Boston was, okay. What did this Massachusetts Government Act? It abrogated the charter of the colony, which dated back to 1791, okay, and it reduced Massachusetts, so this colony, in a simple crown colony. It reduced it, to a simple crown colony. Okay, so the people could not elect a council anymore. Okay, and the powers were given to the military governor, who was a general whose name was Thomas Gage, and the meetings in towns, political meetings without approval, were forbidden. So people could not meet, politicians could not meet unless they had the approval of the governor, the military governor. So once again, Britain was limiting the freedom, the liberty of the colonies. Let's go to the third and to the fourth of the intolerable acts that I want to remind you were issued in 1774, all of them. The third was the Administration of Justice Act. So an act which changed how justice had to be administered in the colonies. What was the aim of this Administration of Justice Act? It aimed at protecting the British officials who had been charged with capital offences. So it wanted to protect the British officials, so the British soldiers, even though they had been charged, erano stati accusati with capital offenses. They had to be protected because they were part of the British Crown. How could they be protected? How could this Administration of Justice Act protect the British officials, even though they had been charged with capital offences? It allowed these British officials to go, to be trialed, okay, in England, or to go to another colony. So if they had to be tried, okay, if they had a trial, they could decide to do this trial in England or in another colony. And the last intolerable act of 1774 was the New Quartering Act. Quartering means lodge, ok? Alloggiare, quindi il nuovo atto di alloggio. Let's see. What did this act state? It stated that all the colonial governors could use the buildings in the colonies to house the British troops. So all the buildings, all the families of the colonies could or were forced, even though they didn't want to host, okay, to house the British troops if needed. Okay, here in this slide I have made a kind of short scheme which tells in the first column the name of the act. Okay, so you can see the Boston Port Act, the Massachusetts Government Act, the Administration of Justice Act, the New Quartering Act, and the last one, as I said, it was passed later. In the second columns, you can see the provisions. So what did these 4 or 5 acts, if we consider the Quebec Act, provided? What did they state? And then which were the effects of these acts? The effects. People were not happy at all. People didn't want only taxation. They also wanted representation. People in colonies wanted to be free. This need for freedom and independence started to spread in all the British colonies in America until on the 5th of September 1774 in Philadelphia there was the so-called First Continental Congress. You can see a kind of painting here with George Washington in the middle of it. What happened? What was this First Continental Congress? A congress was a body, okay, a group of people, and it included 56 deputies, okay, deputati, which represented all the British colonies in America except Georgia in the south, okay. These 56 deputies met in a secret session. So the session was secret. And what did they do during this first Congress in Philadelphia? They adopted a kind of declaration of personal rights. Okay, they declared which were the personal rights of the British colonies in America. The personal rights were life, liberty, the right to property, to own their own houses, to own their own lands, the right, okay, to assembly. So the power to join and to discuss, to be part of an assembly, and the right to be trialed by jury, un processo, ok, fatto da una giuria, not only by one judge, by jury. These were the personal rights declared by the 56 deputies which met in secret session in Philadelphia on September the 5th, 1774. Okay? They didn't only adopt a declaration, but they also denounced the taxation without representation. They said that it was impossible for the colonies to go on paying taxes and duties without having their representatives at Westminster. And they also denounced, okay, the maintenance of the British Army in the colonies without their consent. What does it mean? They said that the British Army could not stay in the colonies without their consent. If they said no, they didn't want the British Army in the colonies to keep control of the situation without their consent. Okay, this was the moment when the American Revolution or the American War for Independence started. It actually started in Boston in 1775. Okay, it was a long war, but maybe the very first important moment of this war was on the 4th of July 1776. That is also now every year celebrated in the United States of America as the Independence Day. In fact, it was on the 4th of July 1776 that the American colonies declared their independence from Britain. You can see here on the right the Declaration of Independence, which was signed by the representatives, the deputies of the British colonies. Okay? This happened on the 4th of July 1776, but don't forget that the war didn't end on the 14th of July 1776 because the events of the war went on, okay? In this moment, George Washington was a general and he became the leader of the Continental Army. The Continental Army was the army of the British colonies in America. But the war changed dramatically between 1778 and 1779 when, firstly, France, then Spain, entered the war on American side, so on the side of the colonies and so against Britain. So the Continental Army together with the French army and the Spanish army managed to defeat the British army in 1781 in the Battle of Yorktown in Virginia. So the last and maybe most important defeat of the British army by France, Spain and the Continental Army together happened in Yorktown in Virginia in 1781. Okay, so after about six years of war. Okay, and don't forget that the war started in 1775. So this was the defeat of the British Army. But the Declaration of Independence, the one which was signed on the 4th of July 1776, and the real independence of the British colonies was recognized only after 2 years, so in 1783, with a treaty, Trattato, which was signed in France and in Versailles, okay? And with this treaty, the king recognized the independence of the colonies in America, okay? But Britain kept the control of Canada. This was the American Revolution, or this was the American War for Independence. Which were the consequences in Britain of this war of independence? Let's focus firstly on the political, economical, financial consequences. As you can guess, at the end of the American Revolution, at the end of the American War for Independence, Britain was on the brink of financial ruin, era sull'orlo della rovina finanziaria, del tracollo finanziario, on the brink of financial ruin. But Britain was lucky at the moment because in a moment of ruin, in a moment so blue, so desperate, the Prime Minister was a young and very clever man. His name was William Pitt the Younger because before him there was also William Pitt the Older, okay? And he became Prime Minister in 1784, so 1 year after the Treaty of Versailles, which, as we have just seen, had recognized the independence of the American colonies. And what did he do? First of all, he managed to restore the public finance. That's what he did. How did he do it? How did he succeed in restoring the British public finance? First of all, he used a policy, the policy of free trade, Adam Smith's free trade, and he reduced the import of duties. He understood the importance of trade, the importance of free trade, and he understood that if England wanted to um, restore, to see its public finance restored, trade was very important. And in order to be successful, trade had to be free. And in order to be free, trade had, or Britain had to reduce the import of taxes and duties. So, I would like to say something more about this revolution. So I want to go back to my face, okay? And I want to point out something which really extremely important. What I want to point out are the ideas, okay? And the ideals which are fundamental for the American Revolution. It's important to say that for the very first time, the colonies decided to join, decided to do something together. There was another slogan besides no taxation without representation, and was united we stand, divided we fall. This ideal that people together, fighting together for the same ideals, can change the things, okay, can change how the things go, was fundamental in America, in the new continent, in those years, okay? And this idea, the idea that people together, staying together, united, okay, united, could change the course of things, could change how the things went on, was fundamental. This idea then spread in Europe, and it is the same idea that idea that we find also in the French Revolution, with some differences, obvious differences, okay? But this idea that things might be changed by people together, united, okay? That fighting for an ideal can make people succeed. This was extremely important and extremely romantic. This idea of brotherhood, of union, of liberty, this need, okay, to change things, to change the old, outworn things of which we were talking at the very beginning of this lesson. I would like to go now again to my face and desktop, so I can go on a little bit more quickly with the French Revolution. We said that most of all the same ideas and ideals which had characterized the rebellion and so the American Revolution can be found after some years in Europe, in France. Okay, the French Revolution. We said what a revolution was. It's a very rapid, dramatic change that changes, okay, in a very short time, the things. Okay, and the French Revolution was a revolution. In France, we move, okay, we change from a monarchy to a republic, and it happens in some years, very, very fast. That's why it is a revolution. The revolution in France was, first of all, against, the the ancien regime, okay, the old social, economical, and political order. That is very important. The people in France fought to change the ancien regime, so the old system, political, economical system, okay? And what happened? This French Revolution was born or started as an attack to the absolute monarchy and to the privileges of the aristocracy. Everybody knows that the French Revolution began on the 14th of July 1789 with the storming of the Bastille, the storming of the Bastille, quella che noi chiamiamo la presa della Bastiglia, that you can see here portrayed, okay, in this painting. So, on the 14th of July 1789, people marched on the Bastille, that used to be a political prison in Paris, and they stormed it. It was the very beginning of the French Revolution. But what had happened in France before the revolution? So which were the problems which led to the French Revolution? First of all, France was a monarchy. The king was Louis the 16th. Okay, Louis the 16th, Luigi XVI. He was a kind of absolute power, monarch, you know. Do you remember that England had fought against the absolute power of the Stuarts? Don't forget that England, we studied it at the beginning of this school year, okay? During had rebelled against the Stuart, against Charles I, who had been sentenced and condemned to death by his own people, okay? Here, okay, we are in 1789, so more than 100 years after the English Revolution, and here again we have an absolute monarch, and a monarch who had the total power both on his people and over the government. During this period, France, or the people in France, were divided into three social classes. These social classes were called estates. Okay, estates. The first social class was the clergy, il clero. The second was made by the nobles. The third, which was the largest, the biggest, most of the French population belonged to the third estate, il terzo stato, was the one of the commoners, common people, poor people, or middle class, very common people, the commoners, okay? And in this kind of stratified society, so clergy, nobles, and third estate, the commoners, there was no chance, or there was a very little chance for people to move from one estate to the other. So the French society was stiff, could not be changed. There was no possibility, or there was very little possibility for people to move from one estate to another. This was the situation. So an absolute king, this stratification, okay, this layering of the population in three different estates, and then there were some close causes. The first, what led to the French Revolution? The first cause was the new debts of the crown, of the king, and the new taxes that the crown, the king Louis XVI imposed. Okay, don't forget that in this period the French government was in a financial crisis. Okay, the king had a very lavish lifestyle, lavish also with a lot of parties, a lot of luxury. Okay, and don't forget that in this period France had fought the 7 Years' War and had helped the American colonies in the war against Britain. So the king had borrowed a lot of money, okay, to take part in these wars and to maintain his lavish lifestyle. So, what can a king do when there's no money? He can raise new taxes. And that's exactly what Louis XVI did. Sorry, exactly what he did. He tried and raised new taxes. And who had to pay the majority of the taxes? Obviously, not the clergy, not the nobles, okay, but the commoners, the third estate. Okay, so most of the taxes, the higher taxes, had to be paid by the third estate, and this angered the common people. Let's have a look to this word, angered. Fece arrabbiare, riempì di rabbia, angered. Okay, when I say I am angry, okay, the root of the word is the same. Potete vedere che la radice della parola è la stessa. I am angry, sono arrabbiata, angered, fare arrabbiare. Okay, so the taxes angered the common people, the commoners, the third estate. Most of all because the nobles and the clergy didn't have to pay their share of taxes. This was the situation, the economical situation. Then don't forget that there was the agricultural production was not big during this period at the time, and most of the common people only ate potatoes and bread to survive. They didn't have much. The cost of the bread became higher and higher, skyrocketed. Do you know what is a skyrocket? Arrivare alle stelle, skyrocket. Okay, skyrocketed, reached the stars, and people were hungry. People were starving to death. Morivano di fame. This was another reason for the beginning, the outbreak of the French Revolution. Then, don't forget that there were the changes in culture of which we have already said something at the beginning of this lesson. Okay, the culture in this new century began to change. Okay, this was the era of the Enlightenment, Illuminismo, and the Enlightenment presented new ideas. We have already stated it. New ideas like equality, brotherhood, freedom, okay? And the successful American Revolution, okay, what had happened in the American continent also represented a new type of government where people could rule. We said it before, where people could change things. Okay, so there was also another problem. The fact that the king was losing his power. He was weak. He only asked for money. And so what happened in France? The members of the third estate joined, created, formed the National Assembly. And they pushed the king, they wanted to force the king Louis XVI to make reforms, okay? But these reforms were not accepted. So the war started, the revolution started, and then, as you know, the king and his wife were beheaded, okay? I don't want to focus on the events of the French Revolution, okay, because I hope you have studied much of them in history, but I would like to focus on the reactions that in Britain, okay, there were on about the French Revolution. How did the British citizens, the British politics, the British scholars, the British philosophers react to the French Revolution? Okay, generally speaking, Britain and also the politicians criticized the evils of the absolute monarchy. Don't forget that in England the monarchy was not absolute anymore. Okay, don't forget that the British had fought against the absolutism of Charles I Stuart. Okay, they wanted a balance, okay, between the parliament, so the people, and the crown, the king, and they had managed to get it thanks to a lot of reforms and also thanks to the English Revolution, okay, the English Civil War. So, generally speaking, they criticized the absolute monarchy and so the monarchy of Louis XVI. So, the general first reaction, so the reaction to the very first events of the of the French Revolution were positive. Okay, the scholars, the philosophers, the politicians, the people in Britain welcomed the change in France. They were enthusiastic, okay? And a lot of radicals, a lot of people, of young radicals, British radicals, traveled, moved to France, moved to Paris to fight in the revolution, or at least to witness. Witness means per essere testimoni, okay? To have a first-hand experience of the beginning of a new world, okay? Of this transition from monarchy to republic. They wanted to witness this moment. They were really enthusiastic. In this first phase, in the phase of the Bastille, in the phase of the Declaration of the Rights of Man, okay, only a few philosophers, a few thinkers saw things differently. Most of the people welcomed the change. Against the French Revolution, in this first phase, there was, for example, an Anglo-Irish politician whose name was Edmund Burke. He was a political thinker, a politician, and he had strongly supported the American Revolution, but he opposed the French Revolution. In fact, in 1790, he published a political pamphlet, you know what is a pamphlet, okay? And this pamphlet was called Reflections on the Revolution in France. He opposed the French Revolution because he foresaw, previde, that it would collapse into anarchy. He was not wrong, because that's what happened. You know that from the Republic, okay, after the beheading of the king, okay, from the Republic we get to the so-called the reign of terror. What was the reign of terror? Okay, It was a system of government in France that lasted from June 1793 to July 1794, and it was characterized by brutal repression. Okay. This moment, the Reign of Terror, started when this centralized political regime stopped, suspended most of the democratic achievements of the revolution. And the terror with its leaders wanted to destroy the conspirators, the internal enemies, and also the external enemies of France. Think, for example, of one thing, that between June 1793 and July 1794, the Reign of Terror took the lives of between 18,000 and 4,000 people. They were condemned to death. That's why the Reign of Terror was called terror. It was characterized by executions, by brutal repression. Only in the month of June 1794, the records say that in France 1,300 executions took place. That's to make you understand how brutal the repression was, how brutal the repression which characterized the terror was, and so also how true were the words of Edmund Burke in his pamphlet The Reflections on the Revolution, where he wrote that the French Revolution would collapse into anarchy. That's more or less what happened. Okay. Then we said that the first reaction, the very first reaction to the beginning, okay, the outbreak of the French Revolution was enthusiastic. A lot of people wanted to see the change. A lot of radicals moved to France to be witnesses of this historical, epochal change. But the reactions to the Reign of Terror were undoubtedly different. The first was a sense, a feeling of general disillusionment. Disillusione. So there had been an illusion, and then people had come and see the results of this illusion. So people could not trust anymore. Okay? This was very general. The radicals, the philosophers, the thinkers who had believed in the ideals of the French Revolution now had to face, okay, the problems, the miseries of the Reign of Terror. And then, from a political point of view, we must remember that Britain went to war with France. Why? So disillusionment, okay, on one side, on the other, war. Britain went to war against France. Why? For two reasons, basically, that you can see listed here on this slide. The first was that France, the France of terror, okay, the Jacobin France, had offered to give money and military support to all the revolutionary attempts in Europe. So Britain was afraid. France had offered its help, military support, to all the people in Europe who wanted to make a revolution against the king, the monarchy. It was a threat, wasn't it? Era una minaccia, non è vero? The second reason why Britain went to war with France was that France invaded the Low Countries, Paesi Bassi, and so England, Britain was afraid to lose the hegemony in Europe. So this was a reaction against the reign of terror. What happened in Britain after the reign of terror? Okay, after the reign of terror, there were the so-called Napoleonic Wars. So we know that after the reign of terror, firstly there was the new king, okay, and then there was Napoleon. There was Napoleon Bonaparte. Okay, Napoleon took the power, and with him, France was becoming so powerful. Okay, it became an empire that England was afraid of it. We will speak of the Napoleonic Wars in another lesson. Okay, so that's all for now. Let me go out from it. Sorry. That's all for now. Next time we'll speak of the Napoleonic Wars, of the consequences of the Napoleonic Wars. I will also say something about the other revolutions which characterized the Romantic Age, namely the agricultural, industrial revolutions and the social reforms, which there were in Britain during this period. Okay, and then we will go on with the cultural literary background. So girls, I will put this lesson online. Please follow it, take notes, most of all of the parts which I stressed that you will not be able to find on your textbook. Answer the questions that I will put in the folder and try to repeat orally as many times as possible, trying also to draw a kind of timeline with the most important events. That's all for now. See you soon with the second part of the lesson about the historical and social background of the Romantic Age. Bye bye.